Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. This is going to be my non-spoilery Avengers Age of Ultron review. Basically like the biggest Marvel movie you will ever see. After seeing it and listening to some of the interviews that he's done, it's easy to understand why Joss Whedon kind of wants to like transition from doing Marvel films to doing really small indie films and just consulting on all the Phase 3 films. Seriously, the first cut of the film was 3.5 hours long. The end running time is closer to like 2.5 hours, so it's still really long. Pro tip, I would recommend you get the small drink, lest you have to leave the theater like 3 or 4 times to go to the bathroom. I know I shouldn't be surprised too, but I got home from my screening and I was already being tweeted links from like pirated, WTF scenes in the movie. I was a little surprised at how fast it happened. I mean, everything leaks eventually, but I know it wasn't someone inside the movie theater that I was at. The print that I saw was like the 11th film in an 11 film marathon, and after every movie they would cycle us in and out of the theater. Before Avengers Age of Ultron, they took all of our phones and wanted us down like we were getting ready to go on an airplane. If you're not familiar with it, the El Capitan, the place where they did this big Marvel marathon, is the same theater a couple months ago where they did their big Phase 3 announcement, where they announced, Captain America, Civil War, all the other films that are going to be happening for the next 5 years. They joked that in another 5 years, they'll turn it into like a 36-hour movie marathon, so you have your chance in another 5 years to do this again. Just to talk about the characters a little bit, Joss Whedon said going into this, this was going to be, much more of a Hulk, Hawkeye film versus the other Avengers. Like, typically Tony Stark, Captain America, they're the biggest characters. But in this film, he chooses to focus on some of the lesser characters. It's really fun when you go back and you watch, say, like Mark Ruffalo's Hulk performance in Avengers 1, and then you watch it now, just to see how he's evolved. The film itself isn't constructed so much on the big action set pieces in the way that the first Avengers film is constructed. Joss Whedon said that like when he went to write this, he built it based on the moments between characters that he wanted to see. So this is like the biggest Marvel character film that you've ever seen. That's why I think it'll be easier for this film to stand the test of time than like the other big Marvel films. There are a couple things weighing it down. Like I said, it's a 2.5 hour movie, so there's like a lot of stuff in there. Maybe not like every single character you've ever seen in the history of the Marvel Universe, but just about. If you are a big Joss Whedon fan, like a fan of the way he writes jokes and kind of his Shakespearean style, this is going to be your big film. He said going into the first Avengers film, he joined the team, like the production team, a little late in the game, so he didn't have as much time to make it his own film as he did with this film. Literally, the idea for this film came when he went to have his first meeting with Marvel about Avengers 1. He explained that was all about Ultron. He's like, I want Ultron to be the villain, and I want Paul Bettany to become the Vision. That was the Marvel film that he wanted to make whenever he was meeting for Avengers 1. So he was like, okay, I'll do this Avengers film, but then I want to do this other big Avengers film. And Kevin Feige was like, okay, that's great, let's do that. And the fun thing about this big Marvel marathon is that Kevin Feige, he actually came for several of the films to intro them. Like they would roll out like, writers like James Gunn came to intro Guardians of the Galaxy when they got to that. Jamie Alexander came to introduce Thor: The Dark World. So they had like big directors come out. And before they screened Age of Ultron, they showed a 3D print of the Ant-Man trailer. I think Ant-Man is going to be a lot of fun in 3D, but we can talk about that later. Even though the film centers very much on Hulk and Hawkeye, really the breakaway stars, like the ones you'll walk away thinking about the most, I think are Paul Bettany's performance as the Vision and James Spader's performance as Ultron. Just to start with Ultron, he is probably the funniest, scariest robot you will ever see in a movie. If you've ever watched Blacklist, it's a very dark drama show. His character Raymond Reddington gets a lot of jokes in. Think of it as humor in that sense, only, if it were written by Joss Whedon. So it's like Joss Whedon jokes flowing from the darkest, scariest mouth you could possibly imagine. In another week when we get to my spoilery review, I can explain a little bit better why he's such a funny character, just because there's some specific plot points tied to it. Paul Bettany is the Vision though. I'm really interested to see which female fans walk away from this film fangirling on him versus like, Bucky in Captain America Winter Soldier, or Chris Evans, or Thor, or like, the people that you would normally expect people to fangirl on. Some of the most gifable moments in the film are Vision moments. Seriously, once this movie hits DVD, Tumblr's going to explode. It's going to be so much fun. The reason I think that Paul Bettany works so well as the Vision is because Joss Whedon, comes from this Shakespeare place where a lot of his creative energy comes from, and Paul Bettany is amazing at that. So Joss Whedon's words coming out of Paul Bettany's mouth just sound so much better than any other choices they could have made for the Vision character. A big part of that casting choice is also tied up in the plot of the movie. Jarvis himself is actually a really interesting character in this film. He's very distinct from the Vision character, even though Paul Bettany does voices for both. But just to be clear, Jarvis is like more of an ethereal cloud. Like there's no face attached to him. Vision, on the other hand, is like literally Paul Bettany walking around on screen. It's not motion capture. That's why I cannot wait to see how they're going to integrate Vision into the future Phase 3 films. They haven't made any announcements yet, so I don't have any rumors to give you guys. Right now, the biggest complaint I'm seeing from traditional critics is that there's like so much of the film dedicated to setting up the Phase 3 films, but that's expected. Like they told us they were going to do that. And I feel like if you go into a Marvel film, you expect them to set up other films in some ways, using post-credit scenes, using plot points. So there is a lot of that in there, but it is important, and you'll understand why when you see the film. They do a good job of setting up the other Phase 3 films without like going on a wide tangent. Like they don't derail the film just to set up, Thor 3, Captain America Civil War. I feel like even though they crammed everything in the kitchen sink into the movie, it works much better thematically than the first Avengers film. Like you could argue that the first Avengers film is just a bunch of big action set pieces sewn together. This film flows much more like a traditional film. Like it's not just them flying from big fight to big fight to big fight. I think one of my few disappointments with the film is that we didn't spend quite as much time as I wanted to with the Black Widow character, but I totally understand why they can't do that. Like, it's a big film, they've already got so much in there. They can only spend so much time with the characters, and Joss Whedon really chose to go with Hulk and Hawkeye. Then you have to work in 4 new characters, including Ultron, Vision, Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch. Like, you have to give them their moments, too. I know a lot of people feel weird about Quicksilver's accent. It's not that big a thing. Like, it won't completely take you out of the film. Really, the breakaway Maximoff twin is Elizabeth Olsen, but she's a great actress. I'm actually a big fan of hers. If you haven't seen any of her indie stuff, check out some of her indie films. She's like one of those actors like Mark Ruffalo that, that will do like a big film like this, but most of the time they spend their times doing like really small character films that I think are much more rewarding for the actors. Yes, you get like the giant paycheck for the big Avengers film, but if you really want like a challenging character film, like you really have to make like a small indie film yourself. That's why I'm really hoping at some point to see some collaboration with Robert Downey Jr.'s Team Downey Films. That's like his production company that he uses to make films, and Mark Ruffalo. Like Mark Ruffalo makes a film funded by Team Downey. That would be amazing. Robert Downey Jr. is a really interesting presence in the film. You get a sense that in real life, he senses like, okay, I'm getting a little long in the tooth, so I can't, hold these films up all by myself. We need to start relying on the ensemble. So they weave him into the film and kind of explain where his character is going in the future in a way that will allow him to take a diminished role. Like thematically, going into Captain America Civil War next year, you'll understand why, even though he's in the film, it's still a Captain America Chris Evans film. A lot of people are choosing to call that Avengers 2.5, and it kind of is because there are going to be like a ton of characters in there, but it will still be a Captain America film. Walking away from the film though, the character that I am most excited to see more from in the future in like, the Phase 3 films is Paul Bettany as the Vision. If you're a big comic book fan, then you probably read some Vision stories before. You understand like why it's such an interesting character to explore in the future. But even if you're just seeing him for the first time in Age of Ultron, you'll totally understand. Like after you see his scenes, you'll totally understand why he is like the most interesting character in the history of the Marvel Universe. I will go as far to say that Vision is so much fun that I will totally not be pissed if they cut Adam Warlock out of Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Like if they don't do Adam Warlock at all in the Marvel Universe, I will totally be happy if Vision becomes his placeholder. I realize that gets into like Thanos, Infinity Gauntlet storyline stuff. I'll save a lot of that for my spoiler review, just because the film does address that in a really interesting way. So be sure to subscribe to get that. What I'm gonna do is I'll probably wait till the film is gonna be released in the United States because I think that's the last place that it's dropping. That should be May 1st, so it's gonna be about a week or so before I post that video. Feel free to ask any like specific plot point questions you have, and if you've seen the film and you want to comment on spoilers, just please use a spoiler tag, just like you do on my Game of Thrones videos. So what's happening next is I'm going to post my Arrow video next because that's tonight, then I'll get through Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then I'll try and get through the rest of my Daredevil videos before the weekend. Daredevil has been picked up for season 2, but the showrunners are going to be different, so whenever I post my next Daredevil video, I'll explain that, or at least by my Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. video. Just in case you guys haven't seen it, you can click here for last night's episode of The Flash. I posted that like super early this morning. And you can click here for all my other Avengers Marvel videos. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.